Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. I got an email from Amy Loria, subject line, General Conference, significant number. Hi, Jared. I'm sending this article that was just released on Church News. Significant numbers, perhaps? 100, 75, and 25? I think so. Would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. I'm sure there's other gems in the article. I'm sure you've probably already seen this or someone has already sent it to you. Thanks for all you do. Your amazing hard work. I'm grateful for the time and dedication you put into this. Definitely have opened my eyes and allowed me to discern for myself on truth. Well, thank you, Amy. I'm glad that you find value in the channel. Really, it's just reading scriptures and listening to prophets. That's all it comes down to. And then just observing things and letting things play out. But thank you for the email. And I'm glad that you pointed this out. This is one of those ones I probably wouldn't have come across myself. So Church News, Broadcasting General Conference, 100 years on the radio, 75 years on television, and 25 years online. Okay, so right off the bat, that made me think of a couple different things, which I'll show you in just a minute. And there were a couple gems in this article that are also interesting. So let's just start at the top here. The first General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints took place on a small farm in the forests of Western New York. About 40 church members, along with some friends and other interested people, crowded into the log home of Peter and Mary Whitmer on Wednesday, June 9th, 1830, in the township of Fayette in Seneca County, New York. And by the way, that was a very interesting General Conference. If you go to my spreadsheet called Quotes, Visions, and Visitations, there were all sorts of interesting things going on during that conference. There were many of those that were attending that had visions of God the Father, Jesus Christ. People were losing strength because whenever you have those kind of experiences, it seems like that's a common occurrence. Like you lose your strength because of just, I guess, the power of like the vision or the visitation. So it was no ordinary General Conference, on top of the fact that it was the first General Conference. Okay, moving on. Today, more than 17 million Latter-day Saints, in addition to friends and associates of all faiths, beliefs, and backgrounds, are invited twice a year during the first weekends of April and October to hear messages from church leaders focused on Jesus Christ and his gospel. Okay, so we've come a long way, almost to 18 million. The process of accommodating a handful of people in 1830 to now, where it is watched by millions around the world, has been remarkable, said Christine Marin, an audiovisual specialist in the church history department. Quote, "It's so interesting how it's evolved," end quote. That evolution has included many milestones and technological innovations. This year marks the 100th anniversary of broadcasting the church's General Conference on radio, the 75th anniversary of General Conference broadcast via television, and the 25th anniversary of live broadcast via the internet. Let me pause right here. So I'm going to get into more about this, but what's interesting to me is the evolution in how, radio, well, I guess I don't have the numbers, but I would assume that radio, back when it was only on radio, before it was on television, it probably didn't reach as many people as it did once it was on television. And then that probably didn't reach as many people as when it went online. And now you can watch it on YouTube, the church website, and probably some other places, I'm not sure, but YouTube for sure, and the church website. I always watch it on YouTube. So it's like a hastening, I feel like, a hastening of the work and reaching wider and wider and wider audiences. Because when it was on television, all I know is that it was broadcast in Utah for sure. And that's where I grew up. I lived there till I was like 28 years old. I don't know about outside the country. I know that at one time you could go to your local, ward house or stake center, and you would have like a satellite dish outside that would receive the broadcast, so you could watch General Conference there. So I don't know. Let me know, your history with General Conference and watching it on TV. Are there other places outside of Utah that you could watch it on TV, like in Idaho? I don't know. But now, whatever the case, with the internet, it really, really does not matter where you live, as long as you can access the church website or YouTube. Okay, so a hastening. All right, continuing. Meir noted, quote, "The church has always been trying to be on the cutting edge of technology so that it can get the message out to everybody," end quote. And then there's a picture. This is Heber J. Grant, church president, speaks into a microphone as part of the first radio broadcast on KZN, which is now KSL, on May 6, 2022. Or, oh my gosh, 1922. Guys, we just made it to radio just a couple years ago. Things are really accelerating. After the Saints' arrival in the Salt Lake Valley, the membership soon outgrew a single venue. The church's first foray in trying to share the message of conference beyond the walls of the Salt Lake Tabernacle involved a man learning shorthand and taking meticulous notes. Quote, "At that time, quite often the brethren did not write their talks. They spoke from the pulpit extemporaneously," Marin said. Beginning in 1850, the man's notes were transposed and printed in the Deseret News. Quote, "In 1897, they started doing conference reports, and they'd print up all the talks, and you could buy the little pamphlet for 10 cents, Marin said. Then they would distribute it to various stakes in the West, which included California, Washington State, Idaho, and of course, all up and down Utah." Okay, now, here's one of the gems, I think. Let me know what you think. General Conference was first broadcast on the radio in 1924. So, if you didn't already have this thought, here it is. That's the year that President Nelson was born. So, out of these three different broadcast methods, radio, television, internet, the first one being radio, that started the year that President Nelson was born. All right, continuing. Although some accounts claim it was 1923. For example, on April 8th, 1923, church president Heber J. Grant noted during conference that all the seats in the tabernacle were occupied, as well as the aisles, and that 4,000 people standing on the grounds would be listening to the sermons converted by radio. So if you want to go by that definition. It wasn't until the next year, during the 95th Semi-Annual General Conference on October 3rd, 1924, that the local radio station, KFPT, which would become KSL in 1925, broadcast conference in its entirety. So I think if we're thinking of an official broadcast by radio, in full, then yes, it would have been 1924. And what's interesting is that this was the month after President Nelson was born. So it was that soon. He was born next month. You have the first full broadcast of General Conference by radio. Now, what I think is kind of interesting about that is later on, President Nelson became an apostle, and then he became president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And during that time, we have this: masters of technology, not slaves to it. Starting his service as a General Authority 70 in missionary department leadership in 2014, 2014. So we were just talking about 1924, and here we are in 2024, where we're going to have these different, the 100 years, 75 years, and 25 years. Well, here's another, year with a 4, 2014. So 10 years ago. Elder Brent H. Nielsen remembers when President Russell M. Nelson, then of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, chaired the Missionary Executive Council, assisted by Elder David A. Bednar, also of the 12. That year, 2014, then Elder Nelson introduced the concept of missionaries using mobile devices, now smartphones, in their daily missionary work. So you see where I'm going with this? 1924, he's born, and you have the first full broadcast of General Conference. Then you fast forward 90 years, like exactly 90 years, and President Nelson is the one that's introducing the concept of missionaries using smartphones and mobile devices. That's kind of interesting. It's almost like there's some association between him and technology. All right, continuing. A former surgeon using the medical term of inoculating, quote unquote, missionaries against the evils of online temptations, President Nelson made it clear that with sufficient safeguards, quote, our youth need to learn to be masters of technology and not become slaves to it, said Elder Nielsen, quoting the church president. So just a little tangent. That's why I think that if you feel the prompting, you should start a YouTube channel. You should do a Facebook page or a group, or do TikTok, or do X, or do Instagram, whatever. Use technology, you guys, please. It's a weapon of spiritual warfare. Conduct spiritual warfare. Use these incredible weapons that we've been given. And I'm not saying like attack people. I'm saying share your testimony and spread the gospel. It's spiritual warfare. Another interesting thing to note before we continue is I have this quote from President Nelson. This is my quotes A through Z spreadsheet under the topic technology. At this time, of the time of this quote, he was in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. This is from the April 1990 General Conference. We're going to go over this, and then we're going to start talking about trumpets. Because the story that you find in Joshua 6 about Jericho, I feel like it ties into this. The spreading of the gospel, the sounding of trumpets, and how on the seventh time, the seventh day, or what I feel like is a foreshadowing of the seventh seal, you have this like sudden increase and going around Jericho and then blowing the trumpets, and that's when the walls fall down. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so at the time, Elder Russell M. Nelson of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. April 1990 General Conference. The name of the talk is, Thus Shall My Church Be Called. For millennia, methods of farming, travel, and communication were largely unchanged from ancient techniques. Developments since the birth of Joseph Smith, however, have risen in remarkable contrast. Joseph Smith had long been foreordained as God's prophet for the restoration of the gospel in the fullness of times. 25 years after his birth, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was officially organized. Later, in that same century, the telegraph was developed, the Atlantic Ocean was first crossed by a steamship, and the telephone, the automobile, and motion pictures were invented. The 20th century has been even more extraordinary. Farming has become mechanized. Modern transportation allows travel to nearly any destination in the world within a day or two. Computers have been developed that allow the church to serve living members and to organize information relative to progenitors who live on the other side of the veil. People throughout the world, once little concerned with family history, now search for roots of their ancestral heritage using technologies available a century ago. And he's saying this back in 1990. Look how far, like I just did a video actually talking about how technology has hastened the work of family history. It's this quote right here. I just recently went over this, but go watch that video or just read this quote. All right, continuing with this. Long distance telephone, telefax, radio, television, and satellite communications have become routine. In these latter days, it is possible for the word of the Lord to be broadcast from world headquarters of his church and heard in the most remote areas of the globe. The divine promise is being fulfilled that this restored gospel shall be preached unto every nation and kindred and tongue and people. So he's saying that in reference to technology. Okay. Every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. Technology. Political changes have occurred recently in many countries. Previous restrictions of personal liberties have been relieved. The shell of spiritual confinement has been shattered. Swelling shouts of freedom fill the air. Surely the hand of the Lord is apparent. He said, I will hasten my work in its time. From Doctrine and Covenants 88:73. and that time of hastening is now. And he's saying that mostly in relation to these developments in technology. Okay. So the year that he was born, you have the first full broadcast of General Conference by radio, the year that he's born, the month after he's born. And then when he was on the Missionary Executive Council, he was the one that introduced the idea of smartphones for missionaries, right? And then we just read from his talk in 1990, him talking about technology. So that might be one of his things, you know? Okay, so that's the first thing that I thought of as I was going through this article when I came across this part right here. And then there's just this concept of the hastening, right? When you look at these numbers, 100 years for radio, 75 years for television, 25 years for the internet, and how each one of those, I think, reaches a wider and wider audience. I feel like that's a hastening. So let's take a look really quick at Joshua. Okay. Chapter 6, Jericho is taken and destroyed. Only Rahab and her household are saved. I have felt for a long time, this was among my first videos. I was thinking about like these 7 trumpets in the book of Revelation. And I realized that's not the only place that you see 7 trumpets. You also see 2 other sets of 7 trumpets in Doctrine and Covenants 88. But then if you go to the Old Testament to Joshua 6, there's another set of 7 trumpets. This is like the first set. And so I wondered, is this story, okay, of taking Jericho, is this a foreshadowing of the second coming? Where Jericho is a symbol of the world, like the current, world order and worldly kingdoms and the wicked, okay? So that's like what Jericho would represent. And then, of course, Israel would represent the church and the righteous, and how at the time of the burning, when the wicked are destroyed, that's when this kingdom falls, like the current worldly kingdoms, and they inherit the land, right? Because that's what's going to happen in the millennium. The current world governments are going to fall. The church, the righteous, are going to inherit the earth. And so just look at how this reads. Okay. Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thine hand Jericho and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. So it's just like how right now it's like we know that there's going to be a second coming, and the Lord's he's told us it's coming. And see, I've given you the world at that time during the millennium and the kingdom, because it's going to be Christ's kingdom. He's going to be king. I have given into thine hand Jericho and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war. So think of men of war as missionaries and those that preach the gospel. Prophets, apostles, missionaries preaching the gospel. Ye shall compass the city, and all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days. Okay, so this story takes place over 7 days. And we know that Earth's temporal existence is 7,000 years. So you have these first 6,000 years where there hasn't been a whole lot of technology. We just read from President Nelson in that talk. He's like, it wasn't until the time of Joseph Smith that technology really started to take off. So the amount of missionary work and preaching the gospel, it can only go at a certain rate. It's limited by technology, by travel, and by communications. Okay, so you would expect it to go at a slower rate for those first 6,000 years. Okay, so, and ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days. Here we go. The 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. Those are shofars. And the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times, and the priest shall blow with the trumpets. So the first 6 days, you just go around the city once. Just like the first 6,000 years, you just do what you can do, being limited by technology. But once you get to that 7th seal, the 7,000 years, like the beginning of it, like go around, you're going to be able to go around lots of times. There's a hastening of the work. So in this case, you go on the 7th day, go around the city 7 times and blow the trumpets. And it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when they hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout. And the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up every man straight before him. Now, this shout, in addition to the blowing of the trumpets and, going around the city 7 times, I can't help but to think about this, especially this one that we did April 2020. Hosanna shouts are only done on special occasions. Typically, it's like when a temple is dedicated. There was a Hosanna shout for the conference center when it was dedicated, and there are some other special times, but it's not very common, right? I have felt, and I know that many of you have felt, that this Hosanna shout, April 2020, was really significant and probably had to do with the second coming. We could be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised. So, and it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when ye hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up every man straight before him. And Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said unto them, Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said unto the people, Pass on, and compass the city, and let him that is armed pass on before the ark of the Lord. And it came to pass that when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests, bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns, passed on before the Lord, and blew with the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. And the armed men went before the priests that blew with the trumpets, and the rearward came after the ark, and the priests going on and blowing with trumpets. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, Ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth until the day I bid you shout, then shall ye shout. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going about it once, and they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. And the 7 priests, bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord, went on continually and blew with the trumpets. And the armed men went before them, but the rearward came after the ark of the Lord, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. The second day they compassed the city once and returned into the camp. So they did 6 days. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they arose early about the dawning of the day. Okay, I think this is key right here. It was early about the dawning of the day. Because if we're thinking about these 7,000 years and how you have the 7th seal that's opened, and it's at the beginning of the 7,000 years that these like judgments start to really come upon the earth. I think that corresponds to this. I'll show you that in just a minute. Encompass the city after the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. And it came to pass on the 7th time, when the priest blew with the trumpets, Joshua said unto the people, Shout, for the Lord hath given you the city. I'm going to skip down. So the people shouted when the priest blew with the trumpets, and it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. Right? We're going to take the world. Christ's kingdom is going to take the world. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox, and sheep, and ass with the edge of the sword. Later on, and they burnt the city with fire. I feel like that's a pretty big clue right there too. That's one of the defining features of the second coming, is the burning. And they burnt the city with fire, and all that was therein, only the silver and the gold and the vessels of brass of iron, they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. Okay. So when you go to Revelation chapter 8, this is the next time in the Bible that you see 7 trumpets. John sees fire and desolation poured out during the 7th seal and preceding the second coming. And when he had opened the 7th seal, okay, so like at the dawning of the day, the beginning of the 7,000 years, just like we read in Joshua, and when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels, that would correspond with the priests, which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets, just like in the story of Joshua. Later on, and the 7 angels, which had the 7 trumpets, prepared themselves to sound, and then it goes through the different angels, and each one comes with a different disaster, calamity that happens. And so it seems to fit in nicely with the story of Jericho and the downfall of Jericho, and the downfall, in this case, of the world when Christ comes. So anyway, the point is we're talking about this. 100 years on radio, 75 years on television, 25 years online. And it feels like the preaching of the gospel just keeps getting faster and faster and faster, and more and more and more so than in the first 6,000 years. So that's what came to mind. So hopefully soon we'll see the downfall of the world, and we'll see Christ and his kingdom inherit the world, and we'll be part of it. And we'll finally have a peaceful world, a paradisiacal world. All right, well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.